Hey everybody, welcome once again to Rise of the GM, where Adam Caldwell and Matthew Thomas are here to talk to you today about a sinking ship, a gang leader, and what are the 8 types of fun and how does a GM use that in the game. Thanks for joining us here on Rise of the GM. Hey Adam, it is good to be back with you again today.
Yeah.
How are things there in Terre Haute?
Doing okay. Excited to talk about some stuff here.
Well, we got some good stuff to talk about. I'm really excited about this, the 8 types of fun. This is something we came up with. And once we looked back, we're like, oh, this also is from Gnome Stew. We just really love the stuff those guys put out. So, guys, we are plugging you hard, sending people your way. But we're going to talk about that. And before we do, though, we're going to get into every week we have an encounter prompt and an NPC. We're going to have that NPC at the end. I'm going to start with our encounter prompt today. It's one about a sinking ship or a shipwrecked ship. So let me read this, and then we'll talk about what this encounter might look like. This is, again, from the book Eureka. It's this idea of being able to just grab an encounter and kind of use that as a seed to get you started, either whether it's for one encounter, for a 3-shot campaign, or going into a campaign or part of a campaign that you would just drop this into. So let's read this, see how we would either use this on its own or dropped in to a campaign. It's called Like Rats from a Sinking Ship. There's a shipwreck on an uncharted island spotted by sailors that are passing by. And when they finally get back to port, they come in from sea, they tell of a ship that was wrecked that seemed to be crawling with strange creatures. Now, this was a ship that was insured, probably by the royal family, and the insurer of this lost ship says that there is a phial of holy water on board. And that it is a cure for an ever-worsening disease that affects one member of the royal family. And he doesn't want them to know that it's lost. And so he says, hey, listen, I'll get you out to the place if you guys can get that file back for me before they find out that it's even been in jeopardy. We need this. And so he says he'll take you out there. And so you guys agree. And en route, the PCs learn from the crew that this area is cursed and generally avoided even by pirates. And as you get close to the location and you see the shipwreck off in the distance, you notice these dark, menacing figures swimming up toward you. And this is kind of the first part of this encounter. These things climb up the side of your ship. They come in and there's a fight. Now, this is not the main fight, but this gives them a taste of like what's coming. And so some of these, you can decide how many come crawl up the side of a ship, and you have to decide what to do. You have little time to react before they crawl up the ship and start to attack, going after holy and religious characters first. So if you have any divine characters, they're the ones that are kind of the center and the focus of this attack. The creatures, you will find out, they worship a dark god whose tenets decree the death of followers of any other god, right? So you got this dark menace fundamentalist that believes nobody else is correct and they want everybody else dead. And after defeating the creatures, the shipwreck and the island can be seen close by. And as you look at that shipwreck, after you defeat them and you see it, there's just like creatures swarming all over this ship. I mean, it almost looks alive, like when you see a part of a picnic that gets covered by ants. You have an apple sitting there and ants crawling all over it. As you get closer, though, they do flee. Okay, so they all don't stay there. As the ship comes in closer, you see a lot of these flee. Boarding the sloping deck of the wrecked ship, the PCs end up going below, where they find a lot of waterlogged rooms and ruined things, with an occasional creature in there picking through the stuff, picking through the pieces. The majority of them have left the ship, but there's a few that are on the ship and they look like they're searching for something. In the area where the PCs should find the file that they're looking for, is it file? Am I saying that correctly? I always think of vial, but file. Anyway, they come across an ornate box with holy symbols on it, but when they open the box, there's nothing in it. There are some other valuable items in the ship, right? And if they stay aboard too long, looking through every room, looking for all the treasure, whatever, tide comes in and begins to pull the ship out to sea. PCs may find themselves trapped in a room quickly filling with water. That's a fun little thing for them to learn how to escape. Not finding the file on the ship, the island, because this is, again, on a beach, right? So the island is the next logical place because many of the creatures fled there when the ship was coming in. As you go into the deepest part of the island's half-flooded cave system, so there's a cave system on this island that's kind of been flooded. The PCs find the creature's shaman, right? And he's leading the creatures in a ceremony meant to corrupt the vial. So they've started it. Who knows how long it's been going. All of the creatures will attack if this ritual is disturbed. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of fighting. And to ramp up to the final battle, you can have a powerful sea monster or a dragon, something worshipped by the creatures, rise up to join the fight. So I love a lot of things about this one. For everything from the idea that you get these sailors coming into port, and it starts off as rumors, right? That there's this shipwreck and it's crazy and this is what it looks like. And then somehow, whether it's right away or at some point in your interactions, they come across this person who insured the boat, who's also heard these rumors. And it's like, before the royal people find out, I've got to get you guys out there.
Yeah.
And so you get this, when you're on the ship going out there, you can, do some of that acting for the insured before you even get on the boat. But as you're going out there, some of the acting with the crew who are talking, they're very superstitious and talking about how we don't even like to go around this place. And you can do some of that. And then this idea that there are creatures everywhere and you get that small taste, and then later you're going to fight more of them. You get to come up with what those creatures are. I love how they just say some dark creatures swim out. And so you start thinking, what could that be? It could be, dark sea elves. It could be, these kind of slimy, mutated creatures. It could be, and you can kind of come up with something very unique that is memorable for the players. But I also like this idea that once you get on that ship and start looking, I wouldn't even tell my players this, but it says, if they stand there too long, the ship starts getting pulled out to sea and they can find themselves trapped in a room that's flooding. We talked last week about having that escalation dice where it's on 1, and then with every round it goes up, and that adds to the attack of everybody on the board. Well, this is a place where I would use a die. Before I started, I would pick out, 6 rounds, 8 rounds. What is it going to be? Maybe even 4 rounds, because rounds last forever, it seems like. And I would flip that, not saying anything, but when I would put it out there and be flipping it just occasionally where they can see me, and they all start wondering, what does that even mean? And then when it hits 4, I'm like, suddenly you realize that this ship has been pulled out to sea and it is sinking. You guys are being faced with water gushing in this doorway of this room you're searching, whatever it is, and go from there. I think that's kind of cool. And then, of course, this whole shaman and the fight, that's going to be interesting. But I think knowing how and when you would decide to bring in whatever this creature is. And I say how, because if it's something that rises up from the sea, you have to think we're in these half flooded caverns. How is this thing going to get in here? I like the idea that as the water came up and pulled the boat out, that it also comes up high enough that water floods into these caves. And that's why they're half flooded to begin with. And this thing can, whatever it is, slime its way through the water into the cave. And then, it's there. And it could be a lot of interesting things. And this could then, turn into, the other part I like about this is it can turn into more, because you find this ornate box with nothing in it. Well, that could be a hook and a mystery for something else. So that ornate box had nothing to do with the cure.
Right.
It's something completely different. And later you hear of there's this amazing relic that's in a box like this. And you're like, I found that box. Dang, who knows? Who knows? So I don't know. Any thoughts as I read this that's like, hey, that's cool, or that's not, or that's something I could use?
Yeah, it's a good one. I do like the plug and play aspect of this, where I feel like so often I'm running a tavern on a dock. I don't know why that is. That's a draw I have. I think it's there's a tavern down by the dock, and so this is nice as far as just considering, okay, it's not just the group just wants to go take it some downtime in a tavern. So there's a tavern by the dock, or it's not just, there's actually some information that I have that I'm wanting to give them, but what's that rumor kind of mill looking like within it? This is a good thing that's available for that, of this is something that could lead to something else that a sailor would actually say. So that's really helpful. I do like the connection to the royalty. You have it's like the ship owner or whatever who wants to save face. There could be quests out of that, or connections there of you did this. Well, I have some other problems over here. That opens some things up. But even the royal family, there's that thing in the background of, okay, somebody
What's
has
the
this
disease?
illness. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's
And
like,
who is the person and
mhm,
how is this going to play out?
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. As a player, that's the curious thing to me. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, we dealt with this, but like, what is this for, and how do I get involved? You know, kind of thing is going to be a thing that I would find interesting.
And the cool thing is, this insured, you're going to hear the rumors from these sailors who are back in port. And I would let those rumors kind of float around for a little bit. And then they're going to come in contact with this guy who insured the ship who's looking. And he can look out of place coming into this tavern, like looking around, like he's looking for somebody to do this. And he is not used to being in this area. And you can even really get into the desperation. Say
Mhm.
he kind of mentions it and your party's like, nah, we got other things we're doing. You can let him get more and more desperate to where his level of what he will give you to do this
Right.
rises to a point where they can't refuse. He'll make you an offer you can't refuse, right? He won't be like that because he's full of anxiety. He's not full of confidence.
Right.
But
Yeah. I like the out of place. I think about him, this maybe more of a business person, like more noble bearing, coming in, but being like concerned with hat in hand of I need help from someone, and even getting pushed off by some, salty sailor, like get out of here, whatever. I don't, and your group kind of, oh, perhaps I could be of assistance, kind of thing. So
or maybe there's even another guy there who's like, oh yeah, we can do that for you. Sure. How much you gonna give us? What do you got? And
yeah,
like
yeah,
you could make him a slime ball who's obviously
right,
trying to just take the money and run. And your characters who feel so good and noble can come
yeah.
to his rescue.
The I can't remember if we've dealt with this already or if this is just another conversation, but this would be a good opportunity rolling off of that for a um, another group that's trying to get this. It's like now there's a
Yeah.
competition of, oh no, we're going to take care of it, and they're trying to get out there too, and it adds that like third element of it gets kind of fun sometimes with that too, of not only am I dealing with these things and this like dark cult thing that's going on with these sea creatures, but now there's these yahoos over here trying to get in here,
Races.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and like we don't really want to like just kill them, but they're also hostile, and you know that kind of
Right.
thing's fun. I like that. I like going more out to the island. I think it'd be really interesting with the creatures to have them muttering whatever this thing's name is at times, like for that to be said. I don't have
When you say this thing, you mean
the creature that they're worshiping, like
okay.
Ugalash,
Ooh, gosh.
Ugalash, like kind of thing. It's like that keeps coming up during this battle, or when they're like, interrogating one of these creatures, or if it's fleeing away, that there's something about Ugalash, and you get there and it's like, what is Ugalash? Like it's not bringing anything to mind with any knowledge checks, and then you get here and it's this unheard of creature that is coming up out of the depths to fight you also. So
He rises up like Godzilla, and they're all like,
yeah.
"Oh gosh,
Oh
oh
gosh, oh
gosh!"
gosh. Like I think there's ways to, build some fear or anticipation, even in that. And it's like, oh, is that like Dark Priest Uglosh? No, that's Uglosh, kind of thing. So
That's ooh,
I
gosh.
think that could be kind of cool for that. So yeah.
Cool. So that's an encounter that you can take and think. This one's really particularly easy to drop in because, like Adam said, almost every tavern seems to end up around a dock somehow in every city you're in. And royal families are always a part of something. I've almost seen in almost every fantasy campaign, there's a royal family that's either good or bad or who
Yeah,
knows.
right.
So this one can drop in lots of different ways, and you can decide what that looks like.
Yeah.
We're going to go on to our main topic of the day, and that is this idea of there's 8 types of fun. And before we start, I want to let Adam just kind of introduce and talk about what does this mean, 8 types of fun, and how did this even come up as a topic?
Yeah. So I've been thinking on this, and this has been a thing that's played a role in my GMing for quite a while, and just like kind of being in the back of my brain. We've had conversations about it. I've had conversations with different people I've gamed with. Our Thursday group, I feel like I ask every 6 months, like, what's your type of fun again? Kind of thing. And
Right.
I think it's a really helpful tool. So there was an essay by, I'm going to just go ahead and like give everybody here, but Robin Hunicki, Mark LeBlanc, and Robert Zubek from Northwestern University. And they wrote this thing called MDA, A Formal Approach to Game Design and Game Research. And like in that, there's this like 8 types of fun that's talked about just kind of generally about gaming. But
see, all you gamers out there, this is high academic stuff going on here.
It's well worth checking out. You can Google 8 types of fun. You'll find this stuff. But Gnome Stew, who eventually we're going to do something that's not Gnome Stew related. I'm sure. But they just have put out really great stuff, and we're going to, keep pointing people to them too. But they have a short article. You can Google that too. Gnome Stew, 8 types of fun. It's very short, but it explains this, and we're kind of working off of this. But it was 2016 when this was written. I mean, this has been quite some time since this came out, and I heard this talked about on I believe it was on a podcast back then, and then got kind of referenced to this article. And the idea here is that like people come to any game with a lot of different ways that they enjoy it. Like there's different reasons that people have fun, and these kind of specific themes are the ones that they found, these 8 types. So we're going to just kind of read through those and talk a little bit about them, talk about how we
talk
relate
about the ones that we relate to, talk about people we know that relate to some of those that we see, like this is a classic example.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the first one is the type of fun being sensation. Okay. So these are the games that engage people's senses directly. So RPGs that have minis, right? Your little minis you move around, terrain that people print out on their 3D printer or make in some fashion, handouts, things that you can touch, pick up, interact with physically. Okay. Yeah. These are the kinds of things that exist in this kind of fun. Savage Worlds players are said to love their toys. They look on the table and it gives them things to touch, to move around. People who also like to incorporate music would be in this, because that's a sensation as well to the ears. So people who love like great maps and great pictures would also fall into this. And so there's a lot of different ways that sensation can be part of what makes a game fun for you. And for me, I would say I'm pretty big with a couple of those. I love visuals. I love having a picture that really puts people in that place. And I love minis and dice.
Yeah,
I love fiddling with things. I love rolling real dice. One of the things I hate when we do a game on Roll20 is just pushing a button and like a dice result popping up. There's something so less satisfying for me. And you guys can attest to this who play with me. My rolling can get out of control. I think it's because of how much joy I have in the actual rolling process. I just overdo it. I mean to just kind of roll them like normal. And somehow I end up pulling my hand way up and the dice go flying everywhere. But there's that clacking and hitting of the dice. There's the touching. There's the feeling a bunch of dice in your hand. That's exciting to me. Moving your mini around. All that stuff. And you don't have to like put your mini up on one of those translucent die cases when they're flying, but it makes it more fun when it feels like they're up. And so you put them up on that. And so these kinds of things, I know Adam does a lot with sound. But how do you feel about the sensation part of fun?
Yeah,
or do you know anybody who epitomizes this?
Oh, epitomizes. Actually, I'll call out my friend Devin. We've had a conversation about this because he really likes board games and like tabletop games, not just RPG stuff, but like these other games where you can get 2 to 8 people together and play. And one of the things we realize when we've looked through his game collection is the games he likes to buy have like a lot of little tokens and little figurine things or beads or just all. It's like it's one of those you open up and there's like 20 packets of different things that you can play. And that was like a realization that like these things are really intriguing and fun to play because they have all these things. And I feel that too. Definitely. I've talked about like tactile, like being able to feel the stuff. I like to hear the stuff. I like to, burn the incense when we're in the dragon's cage and all those kind of things. Like that sensory stuff is really helpful for me. And with like the online play, it doesn't bother me. Like I'm fine online, and I think probably more so than some. There's other people that have a really hard time with it, but there is something about like when you roll a nat one with a real dice, it's like dang. But when you roll a nat one on a computer, it just
You're
feels like
like,
you
I
got
was
cheated.
gypped.
It's like the computer is cheating me, and there's just
Yeah.
something. Now the nat 20, it's like whatever. You don't think about that kind of stuff, but it's
Then
like
you're
I'll
like,
forget
I'm
regardless.
awesome.
But yeah. Joshua Morton is commenting on your dice rolling skills, by the way, in the chat. He says, "Out of control, indeed.
What?
Safety glasses are needed." But yeah, I feel very much with the sensory. That's a big part of when I come to the table, like fun stuff that it definitely enhances it at least.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about it, you think about how even in games that are not RPG games, a game like Risk is a game that without all of those little characters and the
Yeah,
dice, would Risk be anywhere near as fun as it is?
right.
Any game that has, you were talking about your friend who has a bunch of board games and they all have these little pieces. I'm the same. I love those little piece games. You
Yeah.
froze there for a second. I just started kind
Oh,
of taking off with that. What was your thought you were working on there?
I don't know.
Like, I
I
don't
don't know what
remember.
else.
I'm sure it was great. I'm sure it was great. It'll come back up. Why don't you go ahead and read our second type of fun?
All right.
Let's keep going with this.
So fantasy. These games don't exist in our world, or if they do, the world has changed enough that we can suspend our disbelief and separate from the everyday for a little while. More so, we can take on the personas of people and visit places that only exist in our dreams. D&D is the classic fantasy game. You take up arms, you battle mystical and fantastical monsters and foes in a world of swords and sorcery. And while it's a classic, they point out that like it doesn't necessarily have to be that like medieval fantasy that we can engage in fantasy as fun. It can be sci-fi, it can be post-apocalyptic, it can be superheroes. You know, all those things are like part of being something that you're not, and that how that's like a type of fun that people have. If you want to disconnect from the drudgery of reality for a while, then your fun is in fantasy. How's that feel for you, Matthew?
Fantasy. I love fantasy books. As far as fun and gaming, this one doesn't resonate with me as much. I can, I mean, I guess it's hard because like they'll say somewhere at the end of this that it's not like you have one of these all on and the other one all off. They're like dials. Some of them are just higher for us, and this one is one that, yeah, I like it to be there, but it's not. It's not that thing that really makes the game fun for me. And I think that's what we're always trying to identify is what is it for each of our players? And this is for us as a GM, as we go through these, your thing as the GM is to figure out what is the thing that makes it fun for this person. You know, I got this guy over here and I know he loves touching things. I'm going to make sure there's minis and dice and terrain, you know, when he's here, because that really is fun for him. For another one, it is this idea of I've left my normal life and I'm in this other place. And that can be, I'm sure that that's part of it for me, but it's not one of those things that I majorly identify as that's what makes it fun, because I can have fun. I probably just suspend belief so easily that I don't recognize how much I'm in fantasy, even in my real life.
Yeah, I enjoy this. I enjoy this, but I do. It's not as high up for me either. As far as things, I think maybe the places, it's like the locations, like that excites me. But a thing I think about a lot, like I can like empathize isn't the right word. I can understand, I guess, like there's a draw for people to play like monstrous creatures or things like really really weird things, and I'm like probably never gonna play even like a Dragonborn because it's just like weird to me. But I know like a lot of people like that of like, I can play this like super weird thing as a character, and I'm like I'll play a half elf, you know, and be totally happy because it's not that like I don't know, that doesn't drive me. I
And the
would say
truth
though,
is, I would say this just jumping in there. I sometimes I have a harder time going like so completely out of ordinary. So like whenever I play like an Aarakocra, a bird type person or something like that, I'm always like, no, he really looks like a human. He just has wings and he can fly. I don't want like talons and I don't want a big bird face and I don't, I don't want to go that far out of reality. I want it to
right,
be
yeah,
somewhat adjacent to reality
yeah.
with fantastic elements.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That stuff doesn't drive me. I will say there's like a flip, and I think this fits into this, but it's not RPG. But I remember playing Fable 2,
Hmm.
and on the Xbox, and I'm like playing this, and there was a point where I realized like, okay, there's this like mechanic here where I have like a wife and a family in this game, and I have to like there's
Right.
actually a mechanic in the game where you have to like go back and like do stuff at your house, or there's going to be problems, and I'm like, I have like a real family.
And I already have a
i don't
to-do list.
I don't need a second family in a fantasy game that I'm playing on a Xbox right now. So I think, I don't know if that, what does that do? I guess I wanted to suspend disbelief a little bit farther, so maybe fantasy does play a thing, but like it's like the fact that it was more real kind of made me mad, I guess. But
Right.
so that I had to change some things about that game. But so
That's
it plays a
funny.
little bit of a role, but not as much for me as like the sensory thing or some of these others.
I'm just reminded of Dwight in The Office, not only playing Second Life, but his Second Life character playing a
Second, like
Second Life.
that was great.
All right, let's go on to the next one here. The next one is narrative. This is when it comes to RPGs, this element is pretty much all encompassing, right? Every RPG that I've ever encountered, that you've probably ever encountered, has narrative as part of its fun. And we often play these games to create or experience stories from ones that are embedded in the games we're playing, right? I think it's this idea of being able to build everything about the narrative. Every game lands somewhere in this spectrum. And if you enjoy storytelling, this is probably one of those that you're going to love. And for me, narrative is one that I identify with quite a bit. I love the storytelling aspect. And this probably goes back to even in my day to day life when I'm talking about things that I've actually done in my life. They come out like stories with, beginnings, middles, and ends, and like, conflict and resolution. That's just the way I think. And I love that part about a campaign. And as a GM, I love to build a good story, but I have to remember that this is also part of how do my players have fun? And that's the idea of them creating some of that narrative, them being able to build their character story and what happens in that story, and all of us together telling this story together. Right. Like that is a very exciting place for me. But again, as a GM, I have to think, how am I supplying this to those people in this group who really that's their form of fun, to get up and tell this great narrative, this great story. And so you have to leave space. And this is where, as a GM, you don't want to become the guy who has, I have this idea of what this story is going to be, and dang it, they're going that way no matter what. And I'm telling the story and they're just rolling dice to see how it works out. That can lessen the fun greatly for someone who gets fun from narrative.
Absolutely. Yeah. Narrative is, we're going to jump up in my, is quotient the right word? Like the kind of go up in this compared to like fantasy. I think we've talked about story in our backstory stuff, and in our, like, even 2 weeks ago or 2 episodes ago, storyteller kind of thing. Like we typically, people take up GMing for some reason as we want to tell a story, right? So that's part even that comes in. I guess all these kind of do to the GMing role kind of feels a little different with the types of fun, but like remembering that like we're there to have fun too. Sometimes I forget that, it's like, oh, I'm going to create this fun for everybody else. And like, it's not just it doesn't just need to be work. Like this is fun also,
I'm always the opposite. I'm always thinking of, this is fun for me. Oh wait, yeah, I've got to do something for other people.
We balance each other out. It's fine. But the narrative is definitely a big one. Storytelling. But I think that's a really good point of just always remembering like that group collaboration, creating space for it. And I think like this is one where, because I'm drawn to it as a player, um, and it's probably a good word for all of them, honestly, to think through. But narrative is one where, because I love getting into a story so much, that sometimes I also try to press that onto people who
Hmm.
maybe don't really
Don't
care
care
all
about
that
it.
much. It's like, I'm here and like this is cool, but like I don't want to flesh out, the entire family tree of my character, because,
Right.
and um all that kind of thing, or tell more story than what's going on like right here. And sometimes I'll try to like push a player to like, hey, can you give me more, or what do you think about this? And they're like, I don't know, and I need to remember, okay, that's not their bag. Some of this other stuff is. So let's
Yeah.
move forward with those kind of things too. And
And again, it's
that's kind of interesting.
identifying what is their major fun and being
Right.
sure to hit that with them, even though you kind of want to get some narrative in there. Don't press
Yeah.
that so hard. Be sure to look at what else there is
Yeah.
that they find enjoyment in.
Yeah.
All right, what's our fourth?
Yeah. The fourth one, halfway through here, challenge. Challenge. They say challenge is an odd bird in RPGs, and I, Adam, agree completely. This is like a kind of interesting one. Many people play for the challenge of overcoming the obstacles with the tools that your character has, but challenge is very much an illusion in RPGs. It's the problem with having a human being as the GM. They need to make calls based on what they see as correct within the rules of the game, the setting, and 100 other factors, both external and internal. So while something looks like a challenge in an RPG, it may really be more about discovery or expression, which we're going to get to later, or narrative, telling the story of how we overcame the thing. Now, if you're into finishing the story, that's challenge. If you're into setting up a situation and then letting it play out according to the rules, that's also challenge. But, and I'll editorialize here a bit more than in the rest of this, RPGs are not the best kind of game if challenge is the fun you seek. If what you seek is for fun. So challenge is like, again, we're like overcoming an obstacle. We're getting over something or through something, meeting these challenges and winning them. And I don't know, what do you think about that? Like what they're saying as far as like RPGs are concerned with like how you offer challenge, and is it like really a challenge, or is it kind of just a mask of a challenge, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. The difference between a video game level that it is so hard and you keep playing it over and over because you just want to beat that. That's a challenge sort of fun. And that's not, it's like they said in the RPG, it's not that kind of, I'm going to throw myself against this until I can get it. I need to accomplish this. It's more along the way. What are you learning and how are you growing? That's typically the way it goes. This doesn't mean that you can't have challenge in there. So there are some GMs who, they love this idea of running completely by the rule all the time. And I'm just going to throw stuff out. And sometimes it can be less challenging because these monsters just aren't very strong, and they let that be exactly what it is, and you overcome that. And for some people, that's fun. It's like I'm not saying this is our friend Eric Bright, but the time when he got on that Wizard's Way and was wiping out like 300 kobolds with a single, whatever he was doing. Fun, right? Because there's like some power in that, and that's an easy challenge to overcome. Or you may have the opposite, where a GM throws out something that's way, way too hard, and everybody just gets like pounded by it. And for some people, for some GMs, that's fun because I'm like, and for some players, it's like, okay, we went against this, and like, man, just directly as the rules are, we beat it, and it was crazy, and that might be fun for them. For other people, that's less fun if 7 of your 8 in your party. I guess 8's a pretty big party. 4 of the 5 in your party end up dying.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily feel as strong a fun. That's not saying it can't be. And again, it's harder for me to say this is how this fun looks as a challenge because that's not typically one of my higher ones.
Right. Yeah.
When I look at these, I do want. I do want to be facing something that has the danger of death in it. And I've talked about this in previous episodes of this podcast. I don't want it to feel like, okay, we were losing and he just kind of fudged at the end. Hand of God
Right.
came in and we beat it. That is not fun for me. I do want there to be some challenge. So this does rate on there. I want it to be a challenge, and I want us to really have to do it and decide maybe to run away or have some people get killed. I want that as part of my fun, but that's not the most fun. If somebody says, "Hey, let's sit down to a game," and this is the major component, that's not as big as excitement as narrative and tactile and whatever else we may come across in here. So
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense to me. Josh in the chat says, can see the people who really enjoy combat as those who enjoy, quote, challenge. I could definitely see that. Like, and it's what you're talking about of having to be, there has to be like stakes in that, or it's like obviously not a challenge if it's just like, oh, well, this was just kind of thrown here, but there really was no reason. I can
see that kind of. So, okay, we're talking about RPGs here. That's kind of the whole thing of this podcast. But if you're just talking about gaming in general and fun, let's move this over to like a poker game. Okay. To me, this is where challenge becomes like the fun. And it is in that game for me. It is about, I do like the tactile of having like chips. I've never gone to Vegas or anything. I just kind of have that set I bought at Walmart and we play for $1. So I'm not like a high roller or a big gambler or anything like that. I do like the chips. I do like touching them. I like putting them in. I like stacking them. So that's that tactile thing. But a poker game where you just divide up chips among people and then you play and there's no stakes, no fun. There's no challenge in that. Who cares if you go all in and lose it all? It didn't cost anything. That's why even though we only play like $1 game, or let's say we're big and we play a $5 game tournament style, and whoever wins gets like half the pot and on and on. That idea that there is something to lose and the challenge of it, that I could lose it all or I could win it all, like that is fun for me in poker. But somehow that does not translate to RPGs for me. So I can see that as a type of fun in some games.
Yeah, I think I wonder if you kind of identify like one of your players or some of your players are challenge people, that idea of the stakes, I think is important and obviously you can't be like, I mean, in some cases, it's like the combat thing, like Josh said, anytime you go into a combat where you're fighting till the death, I guess there's a stake there of like, you could die, kind of thing. But some of that is like, this may be a bigger thing than what I'm wanting to go into, but it's like, you almost have to do all these other things we've been talking about for a character, or it's kind of like the no buy-in poker game where it's like, oh, I could just roll up another character. Like I if they die, it's fine. it's not real, kind of thing. And so there's some of that of like building in, making it like tangible, like there's kind of like, this is like more real of like there's story and there's hopes and dreams that this character has, and there's things that they've been through, and now it's getting a little more legitimate as far as like, what if I lose this? But I also kind of wonder what that could look like to create stakes in something, maybe like a specific encounter or like a mini arc, like adding, okay, you can lose something here. Like something, this is something you need to do. And if there's failure, then your character, like the party is going to lose something. You're going to lose something's going to be diminished because this doesn't go and actually like follow through on that. And I'm just kind of throwing out like a theoretical there, but it's like, I think that could help if you have a challenge oriented person to make sure that there's things like that in the game where the choices we make, you want them to matter always. But if we like fail at this thing or run away or don't get there quick enough, then the story is going to move on, the world's going to continue, and this is going to be lost. So, that's kind of
it's interesting because as we're thinking about this, I'm thinking games that have competition more than cooperation tend to be fun because of the challenge. You're playing
Right.
poker
Right.
against people. You're trying to win against them. You're
Right.
competing. You're playing basketball. Your team is trying to beat these other teams. You're playing football. You know, those are group games, but you're competing against. In a game like D&D, it's a cooperative game, and you're kind of playing against the bad guys, but really everybody at the table, including the GM, we're all cooperating to build a story. And
Yeah.
so it feels like maybe it's a little less. And so you would have to introduce what are some of these stakes? What is, what is it that makes this fun? If somebody likes challenge
Right.
as a form of fun.
Do you think, I don't want to get hung up too long, but do you think puzzles and riddles and trap kind of things fall into that? Like, this is an interesting thing for you all that are out there that maybe are challenge people. Like, do those things, as a GM, a lot of times those things are like boring to me. Just to be honest, it's like, oh, this is kind of a thing to change the tune of the way
Pace.
we're doing things, hang them up for a little bit, but it's like, I don't know that I'm trying to think if as a player, like when I've been like, man, I just am like exhilarated by this
Again, I
thing.
think it depends on the player,
Well-
right? Yeah. You have some who love puzzles and challenges and solving puzzles, and you have some who are like, come on, this is boring. I just want to get to the next combat.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking now that stuff may be more for me because so two things: your game, Dormant Mind. There was the Fey Gate thing. We went through like kind of a Fey forest. I don't know if that was a different plane kind of walk or something, but we come to this gate and there were the gems we had to cast spells into.
Mm-hmm.
And I had like a piece of paper. I'm like inductively studying this thing to try to figure out, like what, all that stuff. I think maybe that's what Josh is talking here, Arafel puzzle. I don't know if that's that one, but
Yeah.
trying to figure out like, okay, what is this term? What spell would that go with? And like, do we have these things? And I also would say there was another one in your game more recently. It was in the, like the ice, Veil of Frozen Tears,
Right.
Frozen Veil of Tears, that we got stuck on for a very long time, like multiple weeks. We were working on it as we're like doing more exploration. And I remember that's another one where I had like pages trying to break down this poem to see like, okay, what's this saying? And does this connect? And so maybe there's a bit of challenge there for me,
Right.
but it's almost
Yeah.
like more player. I'm pulling that out and doing stuff in real life, trying to actually logic things out. So maybe I am more interested in that than I think so. But,
Than you had originally
yeah,
thought.
yeah.
Yeah. So challenge can be
Yeah.
a way that people have fun, and maybe we even feel it more than we would know.
Yeah.
Let's go on to this next one. Fellowship. Fellowship, a lot of games are about being social, right? You got Apples to Apples, Cards Against Humanity. These are about bringing people together. Socializing is the activity, and the activity is kind of secondary. And there is a win condition in those games, but really it's the humor, the experience, the camaraderie that happens that's more important. You don't like leave and say, we beat Apples to Apples. Man, we did it. We're awesome. It's more about like the social interaction that happens there. And RPGs are really good at this, right? We're conversing constantly. We're interacting with each other. We're building bonds that often translate outside of the play. If gaming for you is more about the people and hanging out with your friends than it is about the other stuff, then Fellowship is your type of fun. And I can pretty confidently say that one of the players in our group named Ben West, I'm calling you out, Ben West, I think this is your style of fun because it just seems like Ben loves the idea of being with the guys on Thursday night. And not that he doesn't love the other stuff, but he wants to kind of be there and hang out and be, with people. And I think that feels pretty evident to me. Ben may respond and be like, nope, I hate you guys. But I feel like Fellowship is one of the big parts of what makes a game fun for him. And I think it does for all of us. I know that I enjoy those, but I think there's some people that that's higher and you can see. And so as a GM, you have to think, okay, they're not really about like becoming the most powerful, whatever they are. They're more about just like having the fun and hanging out and bringing food and sitting and like talking and doing crazy things together in that social experience, right?
Yeah, 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 for sure. I feel like you have to have that to some extent, right? Or you're not gonna wanna ever get in a room with other people to I mean,
It's
right?
true.
Like, there's probably, if you're drawn to this, a group game, but definitely I was thinking of, like, I would agree about what you said about Ben. So, Ben, you can correct us like Matthew said, but, I would say as, like, a GM, this one, actually, I struggle with players, not calling you out, Ben, but like when players are like high fellowship, but the other stuff's not as high. Um, it's similar to like the when people don't have narrative like really in their blood kind of thing. It's like that's okay, but I like this other stuff. I'm maybe more challenge and tactile and kind of thing. I struggle a little bit with that because I always want to draw them in more to stuff. And they're like, no, I'm cool, man. Like,
Yeah.
we're together. We got pizza. Like, we're hanging out for these hours. And like, I have to remember, like, okay, everybody has fun in different ways. And I don't need to press my like way of having fun, even though fellowship is super important to me and like the
Right.
friendships that we have within that. Um,
And
that's the thing I
so
have to
just
keep in
kind of
mind.
playing off of that. So I do think that as a GM, you can think, oh, okay, maybe it is important to have food and snacks around here and have, a time where we have that opening, talk before we start playing for this person. But then you also have to be careful not to press that onto the other guy who is fellowship is just not it for him. And I've been in games. So what's hard about this is we're thinking constantly in our gaming experience, which is a group of friends.
Right.
But I've been in groups where people kind of get together because it's a club, or because they're, I guess, conventions. I haven't been to conventions, but you get people who come in and their idea is challenge. I'm gonna be better than everybody, or I want to be the best player there is, or I love these little things and but I don't really want to hang out and talk with all of you, and I don't want to be like chummy. And so I guess there are GMs that have to think, okay, how do I not press too much of this on him because we all love the social aspect. Again, with each of these, where is their fun? And his may not be there. So for him, I need to get the dice and I need to get the narrative, but I need to like not be trying to push on him. Hey, have some more pizza and talk. What happened? What's going on in your family? And they're like, leave me alone. So
Yeah, there's
that
some
could
good
be.
stuff looking at, back at lights, camera, action. The first one we talked about the entertainer.
Right.
I think it was the entertainer when we talked about like the social hour or
Mhm.
like having that. There is a time to like have those conversations. Not that they can't, again, there's flexibility and all this stuff, but maybe okay, yeah, there's this time at the beginning where we're all kind of getting set and we're like passing around the food and talking about how was your week, and those things I think are important. But like you said, for the other people that maybe aren't as like they're kind of ready to go. All right, there's a set time. We're going to be sure we're playing
Of
by
course,
7 o'clock.
we're all biased. We're like, okay, maybe you came to a club for D&D, but you came because you want to have people who enjoy the
Right,
same things. And so I think we would each say we feel like even if that's not like their biggest fun, we need to pull them into that
right, yeah,
social a bit.
yeah. Give options for that to actually
Right.
happen and stuff.
But
So
like you said, it is good to like remember, hey, let's start at a reasonable time because
mhm,
maybe they don't want to sit here and talk for like an hour. They want
right,
to get to the gaming.
yeah,
So,
for sure, for
yeah.
sure.
All right. What's the next one?
So the next one is discovery. This is another area where RPGs excel, they say. Being excited by what's behind the next door, what's in the next hex, what's on that flash drive that you just stole. It's all about discovery. If you want to see what's around the corner or just over the horizon, then you find your fun in discovery. Earlier, it was mentioned that discovery was in relation. Earlier, they mentioned discovery in relation to challenge. Sometimes the discovery is about how to overcome the problem at hand. And they say the reason they don't think of it as a challenge and more as discovery is because when you can't overcome the obstacle or you don't find the solution, the narrative in the game grind to a halt. He says, to me, that means challenge isn't really what we're looking for, but rather a way to discover a solution or at least discover how you die. I do love watching people walk into the Green Devil Mouth and the Tomb of Horrors and discover that they're dead.
That, by the way, is Tomb of Horrors. That's a killer game. If you've
That's
never
a
played
bad,
it.
yeah, that's a harsh, it is meant to kill you.
There's so many ways to just completely kill characters all over the place in there.
Yeah.
It's what's great about it is it really throws the fear of God into people, like just sticking their hands into holes and jumping into things and touching things that they shouldn't.
Yeah.
After they come out of that game, they're a lot more cautious.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I Discovery drives me pretty hard. I'll say that. Like I think like for a long time I didn't rank it as high, but especially when I'm looking at this, I'm like, I'm so sorry, because as a GM, I'm like, guys, can y'all please just stay together? Like, please stay together. And
But as a player,
but as a player, I love checking out what's around that corner and slipping off while everybody else is doing something else. Oh, you're going that
there's
way?
a reason why he
go
was
this
always
way.
called the Ranger.
Yeah, I started a Ranger and I have always been a Ranger, just in different
Even
forms.
when he's playing other classes, he's a Ranger.
Which probably goes together with the fact that I revealed that I like my thing is that I die, also is there's probably two different things there.
You have discovered lots of ways that you would die.
Yeah, I was alone when the giant smote me to the ground, and I probably was alone when the crocodile killed me.
You ran in on the worm by yourself with the axe handle that was arrested.
I think I ran into that room and threw the sword that cut my own head off. So it's like all these things are,
Yeah,
I'm starting to understand myself better. So it's good. But yeah, Discovery, I do love that stuff. Like, and I think it's part of that like populating of the world that I love as doing as a player and love to see when players do it as a GM. But it's like, what's around the river bend, like what's over that hill, what's across the water, what's in that next room, or like in this chest, or what's in this book, which is like the worst as a GM when you're like, yeah, there's a bunch of books, and like, I want to read all of them. What do they all have to say? But I'm also that person where I'm like, what do I find in this? And that stuff is really fun for me.
Yeah. For me, I think the discovery aspect takes on the joy of discovering who I'm going to become, what I could become.
Yeah.
Like I have all these like ideas and thoughts about like how I could grow and become. And it's like realizing those that might kind of fall in the narrative a little bit, but yeah.
No, I think that's cool. Yeah. Like thinking about, what's going to happen. Whether that's a thing or a character. Yeah. I think that's cool.
Let's go with this next one, expression. This is an element that almost all encompassing in RPGs again, right? Expression's about story creation and self-expression. We bring a bit of ourselves to the game table when we play, and we leave ourselves in those stories and that we helped create through characters that we've come up with. We've worked through any obstacles that arose in those, and the other pieces that we help create during a session. If you like to be creative, leave your mark on a game, then your fun is about expression. This one I can say is super high for me. Everything from the voice, because it creates the character, which creates the memory, which is I love expressing myself and my thoughts and my creativity. That's a huge one for me. And in all aspects, from the way the character's mechanic works, I want it to be an expression of me, to the way his voice is, to the way he looks, to the stories that get told. I love the expression part. For me, that might be my biggest. As I go through there, I love the story when I get to express it.
Right.
When I get to express myself in it, sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's higher for me, but not as high as some of the other ones. But I think like that idea of like making your mark. I love to be able to throw my own, as a player, my own like plot hook into a game, or like the way backstories can connect to try to like throw out just things to grab onto for the GM as well.
Yeah.
Or just like in the moment, I love those games where we were talking before we went live, but where there's like kind of a general, like you come across this type of thing, and then as a group, maybe you can figure out like what it is, or like when the GM, asks like, well, what does this look like, to a player, so they can explain that. Like I really like when that happens. So I think that's the kind of the expression, how it comes out for me in that too.
And that's how, as a GM, you can be aware of, you have players who expression is like their joy in games. Give them chances to build it. Give them chances to be that character. Give them chances to role play. Give them chances to, add to the story a twist. Those sorts of things.
Yeah, for sure. The last one is submission. And I think the best way that I can explain that would be like kind of the ritual of the thing.
Right.
Like it's the every Thursday night, that's our plan, is that from this time to this time, we're gonna play. Like it's on the schedule, like I have that blocked out, and only very few things can get in the way of that.
Right.
It's like not, it's very much like part of the week kind of thing. Or also they talk about this type of fun is about like being consistent.
Yeah.
Like consistency is like the fun part. So the campaign and the game night as an event that's regularly attended, the enjoyment of knowing you have that night of the week or monthly weekend game session with your friends. Those are elements that make up the fun of submission. The ritual of gathering together, they say. If you find solace in that, then being a part of the ongoing event is where you find your fun. This is one I don't know I've ever really like thought too hard about, like this being fun. So I don't really know. I don't know how to speak into that personally. I enjoy when I have pieces of my week. Like I feel like, and Matthew, probably you can speak into it. You probably feel this a little bit. We have a lot of like flexibility in what we do. So I think like there's a lot of like shifting, for me at least, there's a lot of shifting aspects through the week where I'm like, I don't know for sure where I'm going to be. Am I going to be in my office? I'm going to be on campus. Am I going to be driving a student to the grocery store? Like what does that look like at this point in the day? But when I have things that are like, this is a solid, like fixed point in time that I know this is a thing going on, there is something really comforting and like kind of calibrating for me of like, okay, Thursday nights, I know where I'm going to be, and there's other things like that in my week, but I don't know if you feel that at all, but I feel that. I never thought of it in terms of like fun. More
this
as
is
like healthy.
There's an old comic strip of two little fish coming upon an older fish, and the older fish says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And then he swims on, and the two fish are like, "What's water?"
Right.
Because they don't even recognize they're in it all the time. They don't even like think about the fact that there's not water. I think that's how this kind of fun is for us. I think it's there for us, but we hardly even recognize it because it's just so solid a part.
Right.
And so I think you have groups that this is really important to. And, we look back, we've been doing this since 2004. That's 20 years of gaming, pretty much every Thursday. And, sometimes we switched it to Monday. And, there are times you have to call that off in the summer, but we have this, like, we know we're going to be doing this for a long, 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 long time. Yeah. I have other people I know in my life that they get together occasionally with friends, and they want to do it maybe once or twice a semester, or they do it, here and there, but they feel pretty okay calling it off for whatever comes up. Yeah. And for them, this sort of thing is not part of the fun. For us, there is something to that longevity. And I think Eric and Evan would be in, Eric moved away, and yet you still game with him every
Right.
or every
Yeah, every
other
other week.
Monday on a regular basis. You have this kind of thing, and I think for groups that stick together for a long time, this is that water kind of aspect of fun. It's like, how's
Yeah.
the water today?
Right.
What's water? This is just what we do.
Yeah.
But it's such an important piece that I think that can be. It is weird, like you said, to think of this as quote fun,
Right.
but at the same time, I know I love we when we're thinking of I'm thinking of events that happen with our work. We have these bash weeks where events happen at night, and I'm always like, oh man, I hope we don't do something on Thursday because that's my night.
Yeah.
And when I'm planning vacations, I'm like, are we going to be gone on Thursday?
Yeah.
This kind of thing enters
Right.
my mind as an important part, and so
Yeah.
fun.
There's I wonder, and I'm like philosophizing here, but I wonder if the way that the submission kind of piece plays out does affect. I think for me, it affects the type of fun that I end up engaging in looking at these 8.
Mhm.
So like for us, it's like, okay, nearly every Thursday we're doing this. It's a lot easier for me to engage in the narrative. Like it's easier for me to jump into the narrative aspect and the maybe the fantasy part of like, this is an ongoing thing that we're doing. There's other games that I love. I love jumping in and doing like a one shot, or it's like, hey, we're going to do this little mini arc over the course of the next year. We're going to play like 4 times when we can get together. And I enjoy doing that. And I love that for like, part of that's fellowship where it's like, okay, these are people I don't get to hang with that often. So we get to be around the table. We get to spend time together, maybe have a meal with that. And I feel like expression comes out in that a little more where it's like, all right, I don't really have time. Nobody has time for like Adam to build this huge narrative in the middle of, a 2-hour session that we have every 2 months. But I'm going to get real expressive with, the way my character plays out or something. Yeah. Some of the stuff like the sensory is going to happen regardless. But I wonder if like even the way that submission idea, the ritual of the thing, or just the consistency of the game sessions that we have, like maybe even like flows those 8 types of fun for us, and it just comes out in different ways.
I do like that word ritual as a way of fun more than submission.
Yeah.
It makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
So they wrap this article up by saying that these are not on or off switches; they're dials, right? You got an amp with a bunch of dials on it. You turn each dial up to a certain place, and that's like your mix of fun. And so, just real quick, glancing back over this, and we've kind of said it throughout. What's your highs? What's your mix? What are the things that for you? Because it's not one. It's a few.
Right.
What are they for you?
For me, narrative's big, sensation's big, discovery's big. Submission, like you said, is there, but I'm not really sure. I think expression's lower, but not low. Challenge is lower. And fantasy's pretty low for the sake, but I'm still engaging in a game where you do fantastical things, so it can't be too low. That's those 3 though I mentioned, like discovery, narrative, fellowship. I don't even know if I said those are the 3. Sensation's big, but like I am about fellowship. So those 3 I think are for me. Sorry, that was all over the place. But how about you?
Yeah, so for me, I picture it like a soundboard. I set everything at unity, and then I either push it up or pull it down.
Yeah.
And for me, probably challenge and fantasy are pulled down a little bit. They're there. They're not off. But expression and narrative are definitely the 2 highest, with being able to touch things, roll dice, move minis being another, like probably the 3rd highest. Those are the things that get pushed up on my board of fun. If I can express myself, tell a good story, and play with minis, I'm good. Even if the fantasy aspect is there or not, even if the whatever discovery. I'm sure that's a good part of it. If I'm telling a story and expressing myself and getting to touch things, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really good to know ourselves. Obviously, like I think that is helpful. Even as like eventually there'll be a time where maybe we talk about player, like maybe some good best practices or something as a player to help come to the table in a good way. But uh, for GM, I mean, I do think it's really important to know the people around your table.
And it doesn't hurt to jot those down and
Yeah,
keep that in front of
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Ben
for sure.
likes hanging out.
Yeah,
Matthew likes telling stories
hmm
and doing voices.
yeah,
Chris likes, and then on around,
right.
and
Yeah,
then glancing down occasionally at that and being
mhm.
like, oh yeah, how do I play to that for this
Yeah,
guy?
yeah, for sure. Like creating space for those things, not not beating your head against a wall when you're like trying to force somebody to have fun in a way that they don't care about.
Right.
That's important. When Adam goes wandering off down the corridor, okay, he's just trying to discover some things. He'll be back, kind of deal.
And play into that, play into
Yeah,
his
right.
discovery. Yeah.
So that I think those are really helpful, and it's a good tool as the GM to sit at the table with.
All right. Well, 8 types of fun. You guys tell us what's fun for you. You guys tell us if you think about making fun for others.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to our NPC of the day here. And Adam's going to do that. So, Adam, who's our NPC that you could drop into a campaign if you just need this?
This is Patience Witt, the feral gang leader. This is a young girl smudged with dirt. Patience blends in on the streets or at the textile house where she works. Her long tangled hair and moth eaten, oversized men's shirt constantly knock loose items to the floor as she walks. Above her left eye is a vivid scar. She is truculent and uncommunicative with anyone she doesn't trust. That is to say, anyone not in her urchin gang. Her personality: Patience is independent, responsible, and tough. She demonstrates extreme maturity for her age. However, she's also savage and merciless, with a passionate belief that might take makes right. Her motivations are that she's protective of her urchin gang, that the charges that are under her, she protects and cares about deeply. Patience wants the best she can manage for them, so she needs to grab all the power and money that she can. Um, the reason for this is in an urchin gang, almost since she was born, Patience knows no other way of life other than their constant struggle. Under her leadership, the gang has expanded rapidly. With her steady hand, the gang has earned many things, among them numerous enemies and a reputation for ruthlessness. After another gang leader put a price on her head, Patience took a job in a textile mill to lie low and avoid suspicion. She uses her wages to supplement the gang's meager income. Viewing this new environment with the eyes of a predator, she's already begun to make future plans. This Patience Wit, her quote is, "Quit playing around. Finish him off. Grab the goods. Let's get out of here."
So you got this ruthless little kid. I
Yeah.
picture a cross between Newsies, right? You remember
Yeah.
all those boys who were like in that musical,
Yep.
and that pin that you always see for Les Miserables. Is that the girl?
Oh, yeah.
And I know that play is not about urchins that are like in a gang or something, but like that sort of thing. You got this tough girl who's smart, who is distrustful of people. Who might be like laying low because she's smart, but she's still got her eye open for what she can do, and she won't hesitate. Yeah.
Yeah. I would be pretty like, I think I'd be tempted to maybe soften her a little more. I don't know if that's like not doing her justice. I I liked her until I read that quote. It's like finish him off, get the goods. It's like that like pushed it a little bit. I know they're talking about like her being ruthless, but I think you can be ruthless maybe in ways that's not like killing whoever they're talking about killing is what that sounds like to me. And
Yeah.
again, maybe that's not doing the character justice, but I feel like it would almost need to be more softened than to create like I wouldn't want to make her a villain. And I think she would be a villain if she's out there killing people. in my opinion. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Does that make sense to you?
I could see playing her as someone who, because of the roughness of life, has less value on
Yeah.
people's lives.
Yeah.
And you come into contact with her and you have to kind of battle that. And maybe there's this begrudging respect that starts to happen because of who you guys are and what you stand for, but she's still the rougher side. And like that's her tendency is to kind of
Right.
lean that way, but maybe you don't see it because you don't want your party to begin to like, okay, we're going to plot against her.
Right.
It's more like we want to help pull her out of this bad life that's got her so hardened,
Yeah.
and maybe give her something to keep her from having to be that.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So you try to get things for her. You try to get like some comfort for her group, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I definitely feel like if you're doing some like urban things, you could come across her pretty easily. Or like some of her gang. I almost like what it fleshes out for me more as like a hierarchy of a gang that
Network of
you could a
pickpockets.
network. Yeah, network's a really good network of pickpockets. These kids, these urchins. There is a movie, and I cannot remember what it is, but I have like a scene in my head of all these urchins like working together, and it's like not there, but it'll come eventually, maybe. But yeah, I always like urchins. I feel like that has come like uh, out for me a lot. It's like the tavern down by the water, and there's got to be some urchins involved, kind of thing. And
You're falling into Adam's
yeah,
like ideal category,
yeah,
ideal scenes.
this is made for me. So I like the idea of like the downtrodden person that's like also an informant, can kind of be a part of the PC's lives that way.
I like
That
the idea of
so,
these kids who are operating. They're below the scope of the thieves guild, but they're like more menacing than just like kids that you would see playing along the street.
right.
They
Yeah.
are this network of pickpockets who will do harm to you if you get in the way of them securing what they need. And their whole thing is loyalty to each other, making each other like able to survive in this city.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost like I could play.
Josh throws up Master of Whispers from Game of Thrones, which
Oh,
I don't think Adam has watched, but like, yeah, he has this whole network of kids who are his eyes and his ears and
oh,
do the
nice.
things. They're all children. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah, that's pretty
Varys,
cool. That's
right
really
from the
cool.
Game of Thrones.
Nice. Yeah, there's a piece of me that wants to go like Peter Panish here
Yeah,
with her,
Lost Boys.
I mean like a dark maybe a little more dark and ruthless way, but like
She's Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell's not afraid
yeah,
to
that's
kill
true.
Wendy.
That's true. That is true, actually. Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Yeah. I like that being part of the like population of like a city that you're doing stuff in to have that kind of group there. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and good to they're handy to throw these NPCs in who basically kind of see and hear everything and are ubiquitous but also hidden.
Yeah, yeah.
That can be easily used in a lot of different campaign settings.
Right.
Throw in some urchins, and then you begin to find out there's a lot more urchins than you quickly
Yeah.
than you initially realized when you looked out and saw two kids in the marketplace over here, and you thought they were just poor kids. Oh no, they're part of something bigger, and now they're helping you move through your campaign.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Those are fun. Sorry, jumping in again. I think that'd be fun as like a roguish player. Like if you're playing a rogue, maybe you're a thief or something, and you're like seeing these kids make hits in the marketplace of like pickpocketing people. Um, there's we watched the other day, we watched the movie The Italian Job again. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but like there's a scene where it's Marky Mark, right?
Yeah.
Mark. He's like talking about, it's obviously not Marky Mark in the movie, but he's
I love how we don't even refer to him as Mark Wahlberg. We call him Marky Mark because we're from that age.
just showing our age. Yeah. But his character is showing or there's like a flashback of like how he got started as a thief, and it's like in their school, and all these kids are like, the bully like slams a kid up against the lockers and takes his lunch money, and as he's walking away, it's like the Mark Wahlberg's character, the kid, is like, all right, you know the plan. And like all these kids, like a kid like falls on the floor and the bully kind of trips over him. And then another kid like throws a ball down the hallway and he kind of spins around that. And another kid bumps into him and knocks all the books out. And as he's like, oh, what are you doing, kid? Marky Mark's, the child actor, is like, just kind of walks up and snags his wallet out of his pocket, and they just all walk off. And I'm thinking about like that kind of a thing, particularly for like a rogue character who could be like intrigued by a way to kind of pull them into this stuff going on. Probably don't want to do that for the paladin, they're going to get picked off and that, but maybe the rogue's like, like,
or this could also be the spoiler, right? The rogue is planning to like pickpocket, take something from somebody, and every time just before he gets there, this little kid kind of bustles between him, and then he's like rifling through pockets, and there's nothing there, and he's trying not to get caught. And he's like, "What the heck?" And it's these kids keep beating him to the snap.
I like that.
One step ahead.
Yep. I like that a lot. It's also a way to like keep loot out of their hands, but no, no, I like that. I like that for sure. So, well, cool.
Hey, do we have any Haversack questions for this week? I know we might not have gotten any new ones, but I think we had some backlogs, right?
Yeah, we have a couple left. Last week, Evan Bright had asked us a few things. We talked about an example of a house rule that we used, and we also talked about starting to design the campaign setting and like starting local and things. And actually, I had a little bit of conversation with Evan over the course of this week after our talk on Monday. And I do want to bring that up too, but I wasn't quite prepped. So here we go. He said that one, I brought up the escalation die. And he said that is actually it's part of a game called 13th Age.
I remember 13th Age.
We played that a while ago, like so long ago, I can't remember much of anything, but I remember that we touched the game, and that feature came out of that.
It's a good feature.
I guess like I remember to have using that in Pathfinder, so we must have at some point brought that in to do that. So he pointed that out, and then he had a comment on character development after what we talked about. He said that like working with each player to establish a short-term and a long-term character goal could be a good help. And I thought that was really good. He said GM can set up adventure hooks or adventure rewards to progress those goals in addition to what interest the party has as a whole. Goals may shift as the campaign progresses, so it would require like occasional check-ins for those things. But I really like that idea of like, what is your short-term goal? What is your long-term goal? And then as the GM, like, okay,
this isn't too close. This isn't too close to reality. What's your 5-year goal, your 10-year goal, and your lifetime goal? You're like, I don't need a wife and kids. I do this all the time in my regular life.
So suspend the disbelief with it. But I thought those were really good. That comment that he made, I thought that was well worth saying, of like talking to your group individually, like what are the goals of your character, and kind of thinking about it. But we did have 2 more questions from Evan that we didn't get to last time.
Let's hear them.
First one is this: which bookkeeping tasks, if any, do your players assist with at your table? Map making, note taking, battle tracking, etc. We kind of had a conversation about this a few episodes ago, and he was wondering what that looks like for us.
For me, and I think I said this last episode, for me, one of the big tasks that I rely on is I love telling the story, and I don't want to have to be bothered with all of the technical rule parts, but I love to be like, hey, can you look that up and see what does it mean to be, underwater for 10 minutes? When do they die? You look up this rule, tell me how concentration is going to work in this, and then I go on telling the story, and I let people kind of do that. That task is very helpful for me. I typically draw my own maps and get my own maps because I love the ta-da. Hey, here's a big thing. Boom. I don't want anybody to know about it before me. I want to unveil. That's part of the fun for me as a GM. But note taking, oh my goodness, do we rely on certain people for note taking and bursting the goods, right?
Yeah, right.
Whether I'm a player or a GM, I always rely on somebody to be taking notes, and it's usually Adam or Josh in the current game we're in, and Bursing. I would say in the current game we're in, that's like been Brandon, or it used to be Brandon. I think Josh does that some too. Josh is basically just a note guy. He takes care of all that stuff. But
Very helpful.
I'm always the one that's like, well, what did we get? I know I got something, right? How much of that was mine? What happened last time? Can somebody remind me? And I love like kind of offloading those. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, vast majority similar answer. I don't know that. I don't think I ever walk in and am like, I need this to be done by anybody like that. I don't think that's just. I don't think either one of us like formally. It's more in the moment kind of thing. But if I have a note taker, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like I try to take notes, but there are those moments where it's like I made up Knuckles Scuttlebutt, the gnome artificer, in the moment because somebody needed to talk to him, and it's like I'm never going to remember that as we have this conversation and then move on to a thing. It's like, what's his name? And everybody always will fall in love with that person
That you don't remember.
that you don't remember. And it's like, yeah. So
yeah,
when people,
he's great.
yeah, when people take notes, that's a huge help to have a player who takes notes. I do. There's been times where I've had people do initiative, like they will run the initiative, and that can be helpful if you're bobbling a lot of things. That can be nice, or at least be the person who's like, hey, you're next. Like to like remind everybody, like let's keep it moving. Trying to think the Burst Nation stuff, yeah, which is like the divvying up of treasure. There was one that. This may be outside of this question, but and I think it's something we could talk about in future episodes too. But like that idea of, okay, this person can't come this week, but we're going to go ahead and play. And like, what do you do with that character?
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that in different ways. Like sometimes I just run it. Sometimes another player runs that person.
It's funny to me that you ask this because I was just talking with someone here in my office about that, and I just saw like this Reddit string about what do you do when your players have to be gone. And so I've just been talking a lot about this.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting because I started with your example, Adam. We had a player who would have to leave in the middle. We would start playing at 5 in the afternoon, and we'd play till 5 in the morning because we were idiots when we were all single, and we did that. But Adam had this job where he would go clean 2 different laundromats, right? And it would take him maybe an hour and a half.
Yeah,
I don't remember exactly, but we always had to have this like reason. Why is he just here and then he's not here? And so he was apprenticed to some wizard who had a ring on him that at any moment he could summon him and he would just boop, he'd be gone. And so that's what would happen. He would be summoned, and no matter what we're doing, fighting, talking, whatever, he's just gone. And we played that as part of the story. And then all of a sudden he pops back when he gets back in town, and here he goes. So that was like my original, like, how do we deal with this? And that wasn't even they came up with that before I got there. But some people, a lot of people in this thread would, they had, so that this character loved, and I forget what they even called him. I'm just going to call him Big B Spoiled Beans or something like that. there was actually a name, but they're known to cause high levels of intestinal distress. And so they got this, we have a portable fortress right now, but they had a portable porta potty, and this guy, like, he would eat this stuff and they just couldn't stop him. And occasionally he was stuck in the porta potty. And so they could knock on the door and ask him like questions, so like they could have his information, but he could not, do anything. He couldn't be casting spells. He couldn't be fighting because he was in the portable porta potty.
That's
like
hilarious.
With, the distress going on. And that's the way they would deal with this character who regularly kind of he didn't know if he would be there or not. And so, and I heard that more than once in this Reddit thread. So that's
hilarious.
Interesting.
We didn't get into it last time. I think it was from the last topic, but in that focal point, when they talk about they talk about that idea too. And I don't think we touched it too much last episode, but they sorry, I've lost what I'm saying. The they have a thing almost like, what do you do? Like that was a thing that they recommended, even like having like almost written down of like, okay, uh, like Torgen's not going to be here this week. What do you do? Like, does he get whisked away by the wizard? Does he just kind of fade to the background? And even talking about like preference, like somebody may be like, I really don't want you to know about my character, so I'd like you to not put them in the hands of another player. Like
Right.
maybe there's some secret things. It's like, well, let's not pass that over. Or I don't really care. Have them play them. If they die, I'm going to be mad, but otherwise, like those kind of things being marked out. So I think that's like worth. For a long time, we didn't like if somebody wasn't going to be there. It was just like, oh, I guess we're not playing. I feel like we did that for a long time, where it was like if somebody couldn't make it, we just didn't do it. And more recently, we've like went ahead and played just to keep it going if someone can't. But I think
Here's
it's worthwhile.
Here's two that I love. I had a suit of armor that the wearer could go into, and it was an extra dimensional space. And so it was basically this breastplate, and the players would just carry this breastplate around, but like he would like regularly just pop into that
Yep.
interdimensional space, bamf into his armor. And that's where he was for the evening. But my favorite that I would probably love to go, this wasn't a reason if people weren't there, but I had something happen to a couple of our players where they could lose their form. They just lose all form and become a goo. Right. And they had to concentrate hard not to be a goo. And Josh, one of our players, like could not do it. He was just like this goo for a long time. But like have something like that where the party is, be set upon by a wizard who puts a curse on him. Right. And occasionally one of them just will not be able to hold themselves together. And so they turn into this goo and they have to be carried in a little vial for the remainder of that game. And like that can strike at any time.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah,
and Josh's thoughts on that whole goo episode were this. I hated it. And that made it more fun for me because he just kept rolling horribly.
Should he use that hero point?
Oh my goodness.
That's a
do we have any other questions?
One other thing he said right before that is he's got a PDF, which I've seen that before too. It lists different reasons for people to be gone. That's a good help. So maybe he'll put the name of it up in there and let us know. We can share that with people. But the other question that Evan had, which is a really good one, is like, what's your medium of choice for your notes to run the night session? Tab binder, note cards, specific software. That's changed for me over time. But there's two like elements for me that I found to be super helpful, whatever they are. And one is this is what I'm hoping to accomplish. Those high points we talked about, the script that you come in with, whether it's massive amounts of information or whether it's the jotted down notes on a napkin, like whatever that is, I need to have that coming in. And that one is like right now for me, we're running 5e, D&D 5e. So D&D Beyond is what we're, running our campaign through with characters and everything. And there is a GM notes section that's private. And I can every week, what I'm doing is I'm writing that script, the high points, this is what I'm hoping we're going to move through. But then I have another document and it's looked different ways. Right now for me, I have a Google Doc that says Jade Masks. Like it's the Jade Masks Google Doc for me. And what I do every time is there's some backstory stuff in there, background. I have some info about the characters that were given to me prior. But every time when we get done, I just I go in, I select all the stuff that we actually did out of D&D Beyond, cut it, drop it in the bottom of the Jade Mask. So I can go back and look and be like, okay, we're back at Bullen's. What's that guy's name again? This actually happened last week. They're like, yeah, the enchanter from Bullen's. And I'm like, man, I loved that guy, but I can't remember his name. I'm like, scroll. H.W. Wilburton. Yeah, he's the guy. Like, and so having that's been helpful for me is like, this is my working document. This is the refer to later, or like if I'm like in a planning session, I can go back through and look at these things. make some notes about like major people or hanging events. There's a hag that's kind of still out there in my game. Maybe she's never going to interact with him again. Maybe she's tracking them constantly. I don't know, but she's out there. I have kind of a list of that too, but that falls in that document too. So I work off those two, and I think they could look differently, but it could be on paper. It could be, locally on your computer or whatever that be. But that's how I'm working right now.
I had an app that I truly loved. I don't always use it, but and I wish I could share my iPad screen. I don't know if can you. That's probably not going to be very good. It's called Game Master, and you have down at the bottom here. You have different. You have the campaigns, so you can have multiple campaigns going at once, and everything just stays in that campaign. You have a compendium, which has all of the rules, or like the big rules for like 5e, and you can click on any one of those and it just pops it up, and that's handy. And then you have encounters. And so you go into a campaign. If I go into like my Dormant Mine campaign, when I started, here's the campaign. And then each of these down here is a part of an arc. And when I click on one of those, it brings up different chapters in that arc. And I can click on one of those and it brings up all the stat blocks for the enemies that are in there. And you can scroll across, and you can also have the players in there. You can also have pictures. You can also have notes, a lot of stuff that you can keep, and it's all super handy and super easy to find. You don't have to scroll. You can go, it's more like a, what do you call it? An outline where you have like your main headings, and then you click on those and it takes you to subheadings, and you click on those and it takes you to chapters, and you click on those and it takes you to characters, and you can easily see. I love that software, but that does mean that you're building stuff in there a lot. And my problem was I wanted to use this other piece of software I had called Combat Manager to make like on the fly stat blocks that I used a lot. Again, this is the sort of thing that once we started doing stuff with Roll20, then you could just do a lot of that in there. I haven't done a lot in Roll20 because I don't pay for the subscription of whatever the game masters can use. My most often used notes for a session are, I write lots of stuff in random journals and notebooks and napkins, and then I can never find them, but I have them with me at the time of the game. And then later when people say, what was this? And I'm like, I don't know. I've got like 7 journals laying around here, and on some random page in amongst my other thoughts, I wrote some really cool stuff about this. So my organization level is not nearly as high as most, even though that app I showed you looks really good and is super organized. And I think people who are super organized would love that Game Master app. I think it's just called Game Master on an iPad. I don't know if they have an Android version of that or not, but that's really good if you're super organized. If you're like me, wherever inspiration strikes, you write it down, and then you hope you have that with you in front of the computer, and you have some other stuff. I have like this. Mine is so cobbled, and that typically is the way that I run a session. And then getting back to it, I rely on those note takers. Remember I said note takers? Even going back through my campaign, Adam made this poster with all of the great landmarks that happened in the Dormant Mine. And I go to him regularly. I'm like, oh, wait, let's kind of remember what happened there. Oh yeah, that's right. So I don't know if that's the best way, but that's the way some of us do it.
Yeah, I've definitely had the cobbled thing. So that's been a thing, and I'm trying to like bring it back together a little more. But I love that program. It's super cool.
Yeah, it's super helpful if you can stick with it and use it. Yeah. So all right, well, I think we're coming to the end of an episode. We're going to end there, save some other stuff for later. But next week we're talking about what, Adam?
We're having our first special guest.
Special guest, Eric Bright joining us.
Come on, and we're going to talk about GM-less gaming.
I'm playing that music twice because we talked so long. Eric Bright's going to be with us next week. We do invite you to join us and come back. And we thank you for joining us this week on Rise of the GM.
See y'all.